She clinked her glass, lifted her left hand high, and with a dramatic grin slid off her ring so everyone could see. "Look at me," she laughed, voice sharp enough to slice through the room. "Tonight I'm officially single." People roared, some awkwardly, some too eagerly. They thought I'd shrink into my chair, pretend it was a joke, let her little performance fade into the noise of the fundraiser. But I didn't shrink. I didn't smile, because in that exact second, I realized she had no idea what I'd been holding on to all evening, and she definitely had no idea what I was about to do. Before I continue, hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments if you've ever seen someone publicly humiliate their partner and think they'd get away with it. Now, let me take you back to how the night actually unfolded. It was supposed to be a warm, elegant charity gala at the downtown Hilton, soft jazz, clinking silverware, dim golden lights making everyone look a little younger, a little richer, a little more put together than they really were. I remember the small things first. The smell of roasted salmon drifting from the kitchen, the chatter of donors fishing for compliments, the smooth feel of the navy suit I wore because Nicole said it made me look respectably boring. I nodded, pretending not to catch the jab I'd learned long ago that she liked testing limits. Mine, specifically. We arrived fashionably late. Her tradition, not mine. Nicole strutted ahead of me like she owned the place, her red dress grabbing every eye within 50 feet. She loved moments like this, where she could pretend she wasn't married to a man who preferred quiet corners and straightforward conversations. She thrived on noise, on attention, on stirring scenes she never bothered to clean up afterward. I felt it the moment we walked in. The tension under her smile, the electric hum of something she was itching to ignite. And sure enough, after 2 glasses of wine and just enough people gathered around, she found her spark, the ring stunt, the announcement, the forced laughter echoing against crystal and marble. A handful of men chuckled too loudly, clearly thinking she was just being flirty. A few women gave me that pitying look, the one that says, "Bless your heart, you poor man." Others just went silent, pretending they hadn't seen anything, which somehow made it worse. And me? I just breathed slowly, one hand on my tie, the other on my chair, feeling that familiar mix of embarrassment and something colder, something settling into place. She kept performing, leaning against chairs, laughing too closely to men who didn't know when they were being used as props. Nicole had always been theatrical, but tonight she was electric, too bright, too loud, too determined to show everyone she was the sun and we were all supposed to burn around her. But what she didn't know, what nobody in that glittering ballroom knew, was that I'd walked in with my own storm quietly packed away inside my jacket. A storm I hadn't planned to unleash, a storm she had just forced into motion. I watched her from across the room as she toyed with a champagne flute, tossing her hair, tilting her head, working the crowd like she was auditioning for a role only she understood. My name barely left her lips. My presence barely mattered. People whispered. Eyes flicked toward me, waiting, wondering how much a man was supposed to take before he snapped. But I didn't snap, not visibly. Not yet. I sat still, hands calm, breathing even, the weight of my secret sitting warm and heavy in my inner pocket. Every second she flaunted herself, every chuckle she forced, every coy look she cast at men who should have known better. Each one tightened something inside me, not like anger, but like resolve, the kind of resolve that doesn't explode. It detonates quietly, cleanly, decisively. Nicole thought she'd put on a show. She thought she'd humiliate me. She thought I'd do what I always did, stay silent, swallow it, pretend everything was fine for the sake of keeping the peace. But that night, something shifted, and while she basked in the glow of her self-made spotlight, she didn't notice me watching her with a kind of calm I hadn't felt in years, the calm that said, "You just crossed the line. And you don't even know how badly I didn't make a scene, I didn't confront her, I didn't raise my voice, I just waited. Because the real show wasn't hers, it was mine, and it hadn't even started yet." The moment Nicole disappeared into the crowd again, letting the room swallow her whole, I finally stood up. Not fast, not dramatically, just enough to let the few people watching know I wasn't as frozen as she assumed. I moved toward the balcony doors, clear glass, overlooking the city, and pushed them open, letting the cool night air brush my face. I needed that breath, that quiet, because inside my jacket was the one thing she never expected me to have: truth. Hard, cold, irrefutable truth. I leaned on the railing, looking at the skyline, thinking about how many nights I'd sat alone at home wondering if I was imagining things. The late-night phone call she took in the bathroom, the excuses about workouts that never matched the time she was gone, the way she'd started dressing like she was performing for an invisible audience. I doubted myself for months, questioned my sanity. Then I stopped doubting. I hired a professional. Not for revenge, not for drama, not because I wanted to leave her, but because I needed clarity. And clarity had arrived 3 days ago in a plain manila envelope with 20 photographs and an even heavier truth. She'd been playing single long before tonight. I kept the envelope in my inside pocket, not because I needed to use it. I actually hoped I wouldn't have to. But Nicole had a talent for walking past lines she didn't even bother to see. Tonight, she didn't just walk past one. She ran across it barefoot, laughing. I stayed on the balcony until I saw someone step outside behind me. It was Mark, my coworker, a guy who'd seen more of my marriage than he ever wanted to. He cleared his throat before speaking. "You all right, man?" "I'm fine," I said. It wasn't a lie. Not anymore. He shook his head. "She's going overboard tonight. People are talking." People. That word carried weight. The gala was full of business owners, donors, executives, supervisors. Reputations mattered tonight. And Nicole knew that. She wanted shock value. She wanted control. She wanted the room to orbit around her. Mark hesitated, then said quietly, "You don't deserve that." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth in my pocket was burning through the fabric, reminding me I wasn't the weak man she thought I was. When I went back inside, the energy in the room had shifted. People weren't laughing as loudly. They were watching. They'd seen her little performance. They'd seen me walk away. And now they were waiting to see what I'd do next. Nicole was near the dessert table with a group of men and 2 women who looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. She was leaning on the shoulder of a guy I vaguely recognized from another department, tossing her hair like she was auditioning for attention she didn't even need to earn. When she saw me return, she smirked. A long, slow, taunting smirk. A smirk that said, "Go on. Do something. Show them you care. Show them you're jealous. Show them you're weak." But jealousy wasn't what rolled through me. It was something quieter, far more controlled. Finality. She lifted her empty hand, the one where her ring had been, and wiggled her fingers at me like she was giving a playful little wave. More laughter, more eyes turning, more whispers spreading. And that was when I made a choice. Not out of spite, but out of absolute, unshakable clarity. My moment wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be messy. It was going to be surgical. I walked straight past her, straight past the wide eyes and hushed voices, and stopped at the small stage where the event coordinator stood reviewing her notes. "Can I have the mic for a second?" I asked. She blinked in surprise, then looked at my face long enough to see I wasn't joking. She gave it to me. The sound system wasn't loud, just enough to cut through the murmur in the room. "Excuse me," I said calmly. The chatter died almost instantly. Nicole's laughter cut off mid-breath. Every head turned. Every gaze fixed. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't shaking. My voice didn't crack. I just wanted to thank everyone for being here tonight. This charity matters a lot to me, and I appreciate the support. People smiled politely, clearly unsure where I was going with this. Nicole's expression shifted. First amusement, then suspicion, then something sharper. Good. She was finally paying attention. And I continued. "I also want to thank my wife, Nicole, for making tonight unforgettable." A few scattered laughs. Confused ones. Uncertain ones. Nicole took a step forward, trying to read my face. But she couldn't. She never could when I was truly done. Since she announced to the room that she's single, a ripple went through the crowd. I figured it's only fair I acknowledge her honesty. Nicole froze. Her smile fell clean off her face. She mouthed my name like a warning. But I kept speaking, steady as steady gets. And since we value honesty, I think it's time I return the favor. I reached into my jacket. Not quickly, not theatrically, just deliberately. People held their breath. Nicole's eyes widened. She knew that motion. She'd seen me reach for envelopes, bills, documents, receipts, but something in her face said she knew this wasn't any of those things. It was the moment before impact, the moment before truth. And I wasn't going to raise my voice. I wasn't going to accuse her. I wasn't even going to explain. I was simply going to show. But that came next. And she could feel it coming like thunder rolling in behind her. I pulled the envelope from my jacket the same way a surgeon reveals a scalpel, steady, precise, without drama. But the room reacted as if I'd lit a fuse. Conversation stopped. Glasses hovered midair. Nicole stood rooted in place, her confidence draining out of her face so fast it was almost visible. She shook her head once, a tiny twitch, as if willing me to stop. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not anymore. This, I said into the mic, arrived earlier this week. My voice stayed level, as calm as if I were reading off raffle numbers rather than dismantling the illusion of my marriage. I opened the envelope just enough for a few glossy edges to show. The crowd leaned in unconsciously, the way people do when a train is braking too late. Nicole took a few rushed steps toward the stage, panic sharpening her voice. "Jonathan, don't," she whispered, but everyone heard it. Funny how whispers carry farther than screams when guilt is behind them. I didn't lift the pictures out. I didn't have to. The meaning hung in the air like smoke. People understand implications better than explanations. "I won't show these," I said, and a visible wave of tension rolled across the room. Some shocked, some disappointed, some relieved. Because I don't believe in humiliating people the way I was humiliated tonight. Nicole froze mid-step, her breath catching in that sharp way someone breathes when their script suddenly disappears. She'd been expecting rage, a spectacle, a fight she could manipulate into something mutual. But all she got was control. My control. Instead, I continued. "I'll simply say this. When someone tells you they're single, believe them. Sometimes they've been single long before the announcement. Quiet. Dead quiet. Like the moment after lightning before the thunder reaches your ears." Nicole swallowed hard. "We need to talk," she said, voice cracking, her eyes wide and pleading. She tried to smile, tried to charm, tried to switch back to the version of herself that always got out of trouble. But charm only works when the audience still wants to be charmed. Tonight, they didn't. I handed the mic back to the coordinator and walked off the stage, leaving the envelope closed in my hand. No theatrics, no shouting, just a simple, decisive end to a performance she never should have started. As I stepped off, people parted from me instinctively. Sympathetic nods, avoidant stares, a few murmured words I didn't bother to decipher. Nicole chased after me, her heels clicking like frantic punctuation marks. "Jonathan, please," she hissed. "You don't know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," I replied, not slowing my pace. For once. She grabbed my arm, nails digging in slightly. Not enough to hurt, but enough to show she was losing control. "Where are you going?" "Home," I said. "Then tomorrow?" "A lawyer." Her face twisted, a mix of fear, anger, shock, all trying to fight for dominance. "You can't be serious." "Over tonight." "No," I said. "Over everything." I gently removed her hand from my arm and walked out of the ballroom, past the coat racks, past the glittering displays, past the polite smiles of staff who pretended not to know what they'd heard. Outside, the cold air hit me like a purification. It felt cleaner than the ballroom, quieter, more honest. I took a slow breath, letting the night settle around me. I expected her to follow. I braced for the sound of her heels, for the next attempt to twist the situation into something forgivable. But instead, someone else stepped out behind me. A woman, dark hair pulled back neatly, someone I vaguely recognized from one of the accounting firms sponsoring the gala. She approached me cautiously. "I just wanted to say," she murmured, "whatever happens now, you handled that with more dignity than most people ever could." People had been watching more closely than I'd realized. They always do when trouble hits the pretty tables. I thanked her and walked toward the parking garage, feeling the envelope warm in my hand. I didn't need to open it again. I'd memorized the contents the moment I saw them. The arm around her waist at the bar, the too-close conversation in the parking lot, the kiss she thought happened in a blind corner. The thing is, betrayal doesn't hurt because of the act. It hurts because of the certainty that the person who betrayed you looked at your trust and decided it didn't matter. My car was quiet, blessedly quiet. I sat inside for a few minutes, hands resting on the wheel. Not shaking, not angry, not numb, just steady. A kind of steady I hadn't felt since long before Nicole's ring ever touched my finger. Halfway home, my phone buzzed nonstop. Calls, texts, her name filling the screen like a siren. I ignored them, every single one. When I pulled into the driveway, I didn't go inside. I didn't want to step into that house with the weight of her perfume still hanging in the air from earlier. I reached into the glove compartment, pulled out a spare key, and drove somewhere else instead. A small, quiet place I'd rented months ago. Not a secret home, just a contingency. Back then, I told myself I wasn't sure what I needed it for. Now I did. The moment I stepped inside, the silence welcomed me. No lights left on by her. No shoes kicked in the hall. No half-finished wine glass on the counter. Just peace. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let myself breathe the way a man breathes when he knows he won't tolerate being broken ever again. And in that stillness, a quiet knock sounded on the door. A knock I didn't expect. A knock that didn't belong to Nicole. The knock came again, soft, hesitant, the kind that belongs to someone unsure whether they should be there at all. For a moment, I wondered if Nicole had followed me. But no, Nicole never knocked softly. She barged, pushed, demanded. This sound was careful. I walked to the door, my hand pausing on the handle for just a second, then opened it. And there she stood, Emily, the last person I expected to see. We'd met years earlier through some cross-company volunteer event. Friendly, warm, polite, the kind of woman who listened when people spoke instead of waiting for her turn. At the gala, I'd noticed her for barely a second before the chaos swallowed everything. Now she stood on my doorstep, nervous but determined. "I wasn't sure if I should come," she said quietly. "But I couldn't just drive home without checking if you were all right." For the first time that night, something inside me loosened. "How did you know I'd be here?" "I didn't," she admitted. "I just tried the address you mentioned once during a project meeting months ago." "Lucky guess." She gave a small, apologetic shrug. I stepped aside and let her in. She walked in slowly, her eyes taking in the sparsely furnished space, the quiet lamp, the empty walls, the one-chair kitchen table. "So this is your refuge," she murmured. "I guess you could call it that." She sat down on the edge of the couch, hands clasped tightly as if trying not to overstep. "I saw everything," she said. "Not the envelope, not what's inside. I don't want to know that. But I saw her, and I saw you." Her voice wasn't pitying, just honest. And I thought, no one should go home alone after a night like that. I sat across from her, leaning forward, elbows on my knees. "There's not much to say." "You don't have to say anything," she replied. "Silence is allowed tonight." That simple line hit deeper than it should have. Silence wasn't something Nicole ever allowed. She filled every quiet with a complaint, a demand, a performance, a problem only I was expected to solve. Emily didn't fill it. She let it breathe. Minutes passed like that, no tension, no pressure, just the soft hum of the heater and two people sitting in the same room, because being human sometimes requires company. Finally, she spoke again. "I hope you know you did the right thing. It didn't feel good, I admitted. I didn't want to humiliate her. You didn't, she said firmly. She humiliated herself. You just refused to let her drag you down with her. I exhaled, long and slow. Emily watched me, reading something in my expression. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small bottle of water. Here, she said. You look like someone who hasn't had a sip of anything but tension for the past 3 hours. I almost laughed, and it surprised me how strange laughter felt after the night I'd had. I took the bottle, drank, and let the cold settle inside me. She leaned back, more relaxed now that the moment had softened. You know, she said, not everyone in that room was whispering about you. A lot of people were impressed. Impressed? I raised an eyebrow. I stood there with an envelope like I was about to perform a magic trick. But you didn't, she said. That's why they were impressed. Most people would have lashed out. You didn't. You stayed dignified. And dignity is rare these days. I didn't know whether to thank her or brush the comment aside, so I stayed quiet. She smiled gently. You don't have to figure anything out tonight. No decisions. No explanations. Just breathe. She stood and walked toward the window, pulling the curtain back slightly to glance outside. She's not here, she said. I checked the street before knocking. She'll find a way to show up, I replied. She always does. But not tonight, Emily said. Tonight is yours. Her words were simple, but they settled over me like a weighted blanket, reassuring, grounding. She turned back toward me. I should go? I didn't mean to intrude. You're not intruding, I said before I had time to think about it. She hesitated, surprised, then nodded. Still, I should probably let you rest. She walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. If you need anything, she said softly. Even just someone to sit with in silence. I'm around. For the first time all night, I felt something unfamiliar, gratitude. Not for a gesture of pity, but for someone offering support without expecting anything in return. Emily, I said. She looked back. Thank you. Her smile was small but real. Take care of yourself tonight, Jonathan. And then she left, the soft click of the door sounding strangely final. I stayed standing there for a moment, looking at the door like I wasn't entirely sure whether she'd actually been there. The house felt different now, still empty, still quiet, but warmer somehow. I walked back to the kitchen table and placed the unopened envelope on it, a symbol of what had been broken long before the gala. I sat down, hands folded, staring at the thing that had changed everything. Funny thing was, it no longer felt heavy. It felt like an answer. My phone buzzed, vibrating against the wood. Nicole, again. But this time I didn't even look at the screen. Instead, I picked up the phone, turned it off, and set it face down beside the envelope. Then I rose, walked into the small bedroom, and laid down on the bare mattress. No noise, no drama, no ringless performance echoing in my ears. For the first time in years, I slept without waiting for the next metaphorical explosion. And in the early hours of the morning, when the sun hadn't even begun to touch the blinds, another knock sounded at the door, louder than before, demanding, insistent. A knock I recognized instantly. The pounding on the door shook me awake before I could even register where I was. Not tentative this time, not gentle. A hard, frantic rhythm that carried one message. She wasn't leaving without a scene. I sat up slowly, rubbed my face, and listened. Another round of knocks. Jonathan. Nicole's voice cut through the early morning quiet like a blade. Open the door. I know you're in there. Of course she did. She always had a way of inserting herself wherever she believed she deserved to be. I stood, walked through the small living area, and paused a moment before opening the door. The cold morning light spilled over her as she stood there, hair disheveled, mascara smeared, coat thrown over her dress from the night before as if she'd left the gala and never stopped spiraling. She pushed past me the second the door cracked open. What is wrong with you? She snapped, pacing the room like a caged animal. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Everyone. I closed the door quietly behind her. You embarrassed yourself, I said, my voice calm in a way that only infuriated her more. "Don't do that," she shouted. "Don't you dare turn this into being my fault." She caught her reflection in the dark TV screen, saw her own face twisted in anger, and looked away quickly. "We need to talk," she demanded. "We really don't." "Oh, we do," she insisted, stepping toward me. "You blindsided me last night. You humiliated me. You walked out like some tragic hero while everyone stared at me like I was a monster. After 8 years of marriage, you owe me a chance to explain." "Explain what?" I asked. "Which part do you want to explain first?" Her eyes darted toward the table, spotting the envelope instantly, and I saw her entire body tense. "Is that it?" she whispered. "The pictures?" "Yes." She swallowed, throat tight. "How long have you known?" "Long enough," I said, and I tried to ignore it. I tried to reason with myself. I tried to believe you. "It wasn't what it looked like," she said quickly, crossing her arms like a shield. "You think I'd ruin my life for some meaningless—" "Nicole," I interrupted, "don't lie. Not today." She went quiet, chest rising and falling as she wrestled with the truth and her own pride. Then she tried a different angle. "I was lonely," she said, voice breaking. "You were distant. You barely looked at me anymore. I needed to feel something. So you found it somewhere else," I said, "instead of talking to me." "You think you're perfect?" she snapped. "You think you didn't push me away? You think standing next to a man who barely noticed me didn't make me feel invisible?" Her anger cracked into something rawer, something she wasn't used to showing. Vulnerability. But even that didn't change the truth. "You could have spoken to me," I said. "You could have asked for counseling. You could have tried anything other than betrayal." She wiped her face angrily, as if the tears offended her. "I panicked," she shouted. "I made mistakes. But last night, that wasn't supposed to be. That wasn't supposed to be real." "It was real to me," I replied, "and to everyone else in the room." She looked around my small hideaway like she was seeing it for the first time. The empty walls, the folded blanket on the chair, the absence of anything that belonged to her. "You were planning to leave," she whispered. "Even before last night." "I was planning to survive," I said. "There's a difference." She stood still for a long time, her shoulders shaking. "So that's it," she finally whispered. "After everything, after all the years, you're really walking away?" "I'm not walking away," I said softly. "I'm just finally done chasing someone who doesn't want to be caught." She closed her eyes as if the words physically struck her. "I don't want a divorce." "You don't want consequences," I corrected. Her silence was confirmation enough. After a long moment, she walked to the envelope and rested her fingertips on it. "Burn it," she whispered. "Please. If you ever love me at all, burn it." "I don't need it anymore," I said. "It served its purpose." She let her hand drop. "And what purpose was that?" I met her eyes. Clarity. For the first time since we met, she understood, really understood, that she had no power left here. And with that realization, the fire in her dimmed. She walked toward the door slowly, each step heavier than the last. Before leaving, she turned back. "I hope she treats you better than I did," she murmured. "Who? Whoever's waiting for you on the other side of this." I didn't answer. She didn't need me to. She opened the door and stepped out, the hallway swallowing her small frame as she walked away without another word. The quiet that returned afterward felt different. Not empty, clean. I sat down at the table, picked up the envelope, and dropped it unopened into the trash. I didn't need to revisit the past. I'd lived it. Around noon, I got coffee and walked into the sunlight, letting it settle on me in a way I hadn't allowed in years. My phone buzzed with a new message from Emily. "Just checking on you." I typed back, "I'm all right. Thank you." She answered almost immediately. "Good. If you want company later, I'm free." Nothing complicated, nothing heavy, just an invitation to exist without performing. I felt something inside me shift, subtle but real. A sense of possibility, not escape. A sense of calm. A sense of finally stepping into my own life. And as I walked down the sidewalk with no ring, no weight, no chaos trailing behind me. I knew I had made the only choice that would ever let me breathe again. If you like this story, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment. I read every single one.